1 Samuel chapter 26 verses 12-13 and 22-23. Though the Lord delivered you into my grasp, I would not harm you. In those days, Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with 3,000 picked men of Israel, to search for David in the desert of Ziph. So, David and Abishai went among Saul's soldiers by night, and found Saul lying asleep within the barricade, with his spear thrust into the ground at his head and Abner and his men sleeping around him. Abishai whispered to David, "God has delivered your enemy into your grasp this day. Let me nail him to the ground with one thrust of the spear, I will not need a second thrust." But David said to Abishai, "Do not harm him, for who can lay hands on the Lord's anointed and remain unpunished?" So David took the spear and the water jug from their place at Saul's head, and they got away without anyone seeing or knowing or awakening. All remained asleep, because the Lord had put them into a deep slumber. Across to an opposite slope, David stood on a remote hilltop, at a great distance from Abner, son of Ner, and the troops. He said, "Here is the king's spear. Let an attendant come over to get it. The Lord will reward each man for his justice and faithfulness. Today, though the Lord delivered you into my grasp, I would not harm the Lord's anointed." Jealousy is a dangerous emotion. King Saul is jealous of David's abilities and his good standing with the people. The king views David as a threat to his kingship, and what better way to eliminate the threat than to kill the person? Saul has been trying to kill David for some time with no success, cause God is protecting David. Saul has gathered 3,000 hand-picked soldiers of Israel to track David down and kill him. Abner, King Saul's cousin, advisor, and commander of his army along with the king's bodyguard were asleep, as was Saul, when David and Abishai invaded Saul's camp at night. They found themselves standing right next to Saul, who had stuck his spear in the ground next to his head. Abishai was the son of David's sister and was known as the bravest of David's mighty men. Abishai wanted to take advantage of what appeared to be a great opportunity. But David said to Abishai, "Do not harm him, for who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and remain innocent? As the Lord lives," David declared, "only the Lord can strike him, either when the time comes for him to die, or when he goes out and perishes in battle. But the Lord forbid that I lay a hand on the Lord's anointed." Like many of us, David had good, bad, and shameful times in his life, but one thing that never changed was his unwavering faith in God. There is an old saying, "It's easier to ask for forgiveness, than to ask for permission." It would have been easy to give Abishai permission to kill King Saul, and end the king's vendetta. Then he could have asked for God's forgiveness, but David had unshakable faith in God's wisdom and plans. There is a valuable lesson to be learned in David's decision. A jealous and avenging God is the Lord, an avenger is the Lord, full of wrath. The Lord takes vengeance on his adversaries, and rages against his enemies. David was certain that God had a plan to deal with King Saul, and God didn't need David's help. Let go and let God take care of problems in your life.